Hey everybody, welcome to the Song Revolution podcast, brought to you by Nashville Christian Songwriters. Nashville Christian Songwriters exists to empower Christian songwriters worldwide. I'm John Chisum, and this podcast exists to bring you valuable songwriting insights, inspiration, interviews, and just all around good fun with some of the greatest songwriters, producers, arrangers, artists, and creatives, and beyond. You can find out a whole lot more about us at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com.
Hello, friend. Peter Hartzell here, producer for the Song Revolution podcast. Today, I am very pleased to introduce a special two-part show. John Chisum had a fantastic conversation with Centricity Music's own Ross King. For those of you who remember, Ross joined us in July for our Song Revolution workshop. Ross is one of the most authentic and honest songwriters in Nashville, and he has built a multifaceted career producing, writing, and performing as an independent artist, developing sync licensing content for TV and film, writing and placing songs with other artists, and co-writing with some of the best in Nashville. Because he has such a broad catalog of experiences, Ross carries a unique voice to speak into you, the growing songwriter, and he provides valuable insight into what it really takes to settle into a richly rewarding career as a full-time songwriter. We decided to break this conversation up into two parts so that you have the opportunity to absorb all the wisdom Ross brings to the table. If you listen and take notes, I know you will emerge a more informed and insightful songwriter. But before we dig into part one of this special two-part show, I'd love to invite you to join us right here in Nashville, October 17th, 18th, and 19th for our Song Revolution workshop. You'll get dedicated song coaching and critiques from some of the most accomplished songwriters in Nashville and learn from legendary live music producer Tom Jackson, who has coached music's top stars like Shawn Mendes and Taylor Swift. We are almost full, so don't miss out on your chance to be part of this epic event. You can save $100 when you head over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com right now to claim your spot. All right, let's dive right in. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this fun, encouraging, and insightful show with Centricity Music songwriter Ross King.
All right, well, Ross King, welcome to the Song Revolution, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, man, it's great to have you, of course. We're sitting here in the illustrious Centricity Music conference room where I guess CCM royalty visits every now and then, right?
Not when I'm here, but yes, probably so. They probably do sit here at some point. They don't even invite me to those meetings.
No, yeah.
But, no, I don't.
Me either, but we're here, and there's lots of gold and platinum records adorning the walls of the hallowed halls here at Centricity. But we're very thankful. John Mays, founder and A&R director, great friend, and always invites us in for our Song Revolution workshops. He just always hosts us here for a lovely Martin's barbecue dinner and brings in amazing people like you. You were here with us in July. We sure enjoyed that, Ross.
Thank you. And John, actually, I won't share it here, but he was a big part of me being in town and being a songwriter with Centricity. Really, really big part of that.
Well, I want to get into that. I do. I think that would be a great place for us to start today, is maybe just catching us up. You know, as I said, you are a full-time, you're living the dream that so many people that we talk with would love to have. Would love to trade places with you and be a full-on professional Christian songwriter. So maybe you could just give us the overview, the highlights. I know this isn't your first rodeo, it isn't your first deal, but here you are, in such an amazing place. So how did all that happen?
Yeah, and I should probably be utterly honest and say it's not always dreamy, this dream I'm living, but it is something I always wanted to be doing. Briefly, I was an independent songwriter and singer, performer, worship leader in Texas for a long time. And maybe 10 years ago, I was doing some work, low-level kind of sync TV ad stuff through an organization that helps play stuff like that. And I was at a conference, and a woman named Cindy Wilt, who I know you know, kind of discovered me at this conference, long story short. And she was starting a consulting business to do songwriter consulting, and offered me a pretty great rate to kind of be one of her first clients, and felt like she thought I had something worth doing. And at the time, I had given up on all my dreams of having CCM mainstream success, mostly as an artist. But I hired her for a few months, and about a year into working with her, I had gotten some cuts, nothing major, but I'd gotten some cuts with some CCM mainstream folks, and started getting publishing offers, because at least then, I think it's probably still true, but if you get a handful of cuts and aren't published, somebody wants to publish that.
Yeah, exactly. So, who were some of those early cuts with?
Let's see. I had Todd Agnew. I had there was a woman named Heather Williams who's no longer doing this, but she was at Fair Trade. I'm trying to think if that early on I had Jason Gray or any of that stuff. Carrollton was probably early in that time period, which is a Centricity artist. And then some like mega church type stuff, where it'd be like, wouldn't be signed people, but huge churches where they're selling a lot of records and CCLI and all that.
So just for our listeners, Fair Trade is another label and publisher here in town, and you had to deal with them at first, right?
Yes, I signed with Fair Trade in 2012, and was there until about 2 years ago. And now I'm at Centricity. A couple of years into having a publishing deal, I realized that living in Texas, it was going to be very difficult for me to maintain any momentum in my career. I'd fly out here and I would spend a week. And if it was one of those things that if I had success, I actually got upset because someone would say, that was really good. Can you come back next week or in 10 days? And I would say, no, I live in Texas. I'll be back in 10 weeks. And by that time, as you know, John, the album cycle for that record was probably done, and who knows what, right? So I would lose the momentum, and so I remember coming home after one trip, and this is where the John Mays portion comes in. He and I had met on that trip, not met for the first time, but we had a lunch, and he'd said some really encouraging things to me about my songwriting, and I kind of had this combo of a very successful week, a great conversation with John. And I came home to, we weren't doing too good financially, and some other things were going on in my life that made it clear that we just needed to try this. And I remember telling my wife, I either need to quit writing songs and spending money flying out to Nashville, or we need to move. And my awesome wife said, let's move.
That is an awesome wife.
Yes.
So you've been here 4 years now.
That's right.
And tell us maybe a little bit about the life of a full-time songwriter.
Yeah, and I want to be clear when you use that phrase, full-time songwriter, that for me that means 5 or 6 different songwriting things that complete a full-time job. So I write for Centricity, which is primarily, we find out about an artist that's looking for songs or that's co-writing for songs, and we get put in the room with those artists or get put in the room to try to write for those artists or whatever. It involves some what's called sync music, which is synchronized for film, TV ads. So we'll get briefs for that. Hey, can you write this? They're looking for, there's a Netflix TV show looking for whatever, or a Toyota ad or something. And so I do that with Centricity. And then on my own, I write artist music for me as an artist, very independent, small, but it's a little left of center. I'm able to kind of scratch a different kind of itch. I'm not trying to get on the radio or any of that. I'm unsigned as an artist. I do some kids music where I write music like for Bible verses and kid stuff, and I do some songwriting coaching. I do some producing. There's a bunch of things that I tell people, unless you're in the 1% of the 1% in talent or in fortune, you got to have a lot of things you're good at if you want to be in this field.
Yeah, very true. It's like you have to do a lot of things around songwriting and not just songwriting.
Exactly. And a lot of kinds of songwriting and a lot of, being open to something you hadn't thought you would be doing, or something that you wouldn't think would be a very interesting or passionate thing, but that still is good. I make the joke that your doctor can probably do all kinds of complicated medical procedures, but during flu season, they give a bunch of shots. And they could teach us to do that probably, right? It's not complicated or interesting or even fun for them, but in flu season they got to give flu shots. And I think a lot of our creative people, a lot of our careers is figuring out what kind of flu shots we need to give and at what times of our lives to keep the whole thing moving.
Right. Well, when you were at our dinner here at Centricity for the Song Revolution workshop back in July, I think the biggest hit of the night was Seahorses.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want a story there, but I basically,
absolutely.
John's mentioning this song that I wrote as a point of kind of self therapy. I talk about how songwriting can have the goal of reaching thousands. It can have the goal of reaching a small group of fans, or it can have the goal of getting you through the day. And I kind of have some social thresholds where I can get over socialized and feel like I'm, kind of going crazy with introversion. And I was having a day like that with some good friends of ours who were in town visiting us, great people who we love so much, but I was just kind of peopled out. And we were at the zoo, the Nashville Zoo, which is this awesome, awesome zoo, but it was crowded. And I was in the third or fourth day of their visit and feeling very overwhelmed. And basically my wife, who's awesome, comes to me and says, "Hey, you're doing that thing where you kind of start acting like a jerk to people who you like because you've reached your social limit or whatever. Whatever you need to do to be okay, you need to do it." And she's awesome. And so we were at the zoo and we were at the aquarium, and I remember immediately looking over at a little aquarium section of the aquarium, and there were these seahorses, and I just thought, I'm going to write a song about those things. They kind of look like horses in the middle of a bunch of fish. They probably feel really awkward, just like me. And I'm going to write a song about it. So I have this song called Seahorses that is just nonsense, pretty much. It's basically just an exercise in rhyming things with the word horses. And I play it sometimes at things. I played it for this event John's talking about. And I guess the crowd went wild, I guess.
Well, especially when you kind of manipulated it into horses. And
okay,
I forget what the rhyme is. But
no, one of my favorite songwriting achievements was there's a line that says, "There's a sense of deep catharsis when riding on seahorses." And I feel pretty proud of that.
Yeah. It kind of got Lerner and Lowe, or a little bit of a musical, right? It kind of went that way for me, which was great, man. And I think that was the moment in the whole evening that felt like people... everybody loved everything you did, the serious songs, and you just sharing your heart about how you live a pretty average middle-class life.
Right.
And, and everybody was kind of feeling sorry for you, like, oh, aren't you rich? And
mission accomplished.
And then you pull out Seahorses, and it just kind of broke everything. So,
good.
Yeah,
that's good.
It was really powerful. So
thank you.
So the life of a pro Christian songwriter, getting cuts on people's albums whose names we know, is just not as glamorous as we might imagine. Is that what I'm kind of picking up?
Well, I can't tell you what anyone else was imagined, but for me, I can tell you with certainty that when I signed a publishing deal in 2012, I was certain that within a year I was going to be rich, and that didn't happen. Now who knows? Maybe that for some people that's the way it happens, but for me. We can get into all this or not, but we're in the streaming age. We're in an age where music doesn't make as much money. A lot of music doesn't make as much money as it used to. It's just, we're in a singles world. So I've gotten, I don't mind saying I've gotten a lot of cuts. I'm really fortunate to have, I think in 2018, I had something like 30 cuts, which is, by any measure, that's a good bit of cuts, but they don't amount to a ton of money. And
so for people listening who might not know what a cut is.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We say it, I just try to explain things that seem obscure, and that's when you get a song placed on someone's recording.
Right. Yeah. We just say, somebody cut my song, and that just, I don't know. I don't even know why they even say cut. Seems
well, because back in the day when they used to cut vinyl.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's where it came from.
Okay. Well,
yeah, they actually cut.
Yeah. So when I say I got 30 cuts, I just mean that around 30 times in 2018, someone else besides me said, I like this song well enough that I'm gonna record it. Sometimes it was a song I wrote with them. Sometimes it was a song I wrote for them or that they just found. But yeah, I had a good bit. But I'm not a guy who has a ton of big radio or one time kind of like, oh, that song made, you got this one big check for it. I tend to be that guy who my publishing statement has 100 songs on it, and some of them are worth a quarter for that quarter.
Right.
And some are worth $100 and some are worth 1,000, but most of them are worth something towards the bottom of that.
I remember Gary McSpadden years and years ago, 35 years ago, when I stumbled into town and met Bill Gaither and Gary McSpadden. And Gary told me back then, he said, it's not about, trying to get big songs. You hope for those, but you write a whole lot of little songs.
Yes.
And that makes the royalty statements stand up. So what would you say is your biggest song or your best known song?
Well, I have this kind of pseudo-viral thing called Clear the Stage that I wrote years ago that's never really been anywhere radio-wise, but if you were to type in the phrase Clear the Stage on like YouTube, you'd get tired before you ran through all the covers and lyric videos. Artist-wise, I had a Newsboys cut that did okay called Hallelujah for the Cross that, again, not a massive single, but did fine. I've literally never had a bona fide radio hit, ever. I've only had top 20 or whatever, but I just continue to get a lot, but yeah, I would say Clear the Stage or Hallelujah for the Cross probably were two of the bigger ones. Yeah.
What's the most unusual writing session that you've ever been in?
I got to make sure I don't throw anybody under the bus. I've had, I'll tell you about one day that I had when I had two writes and they were polar opposites. And this will give you a nice broad kind of swath of what's out there. My dad passed away in an accident in 2012, and I was scheduled to go the next day to Nashville. I was in Texas still. And I ended up not going, obviously because he died. But I went a month later, and I had 2-a-days. Like we do these two-day things, kind of 10 to 2, 2:30 to 6, or something type things. And my 10 to 2 was with someone who was pretty successful as a songwriter. This wasn't an artist; it was a songwriter. And I feel like I was treated really, really poorly in kind of a none of my ideas are any good. And I think this person might be known a little bit for that, just a strong personality, that kind of thing. But I didn't feel treated very, very well. And then at the end of it, I literally remember there was a moment this person said to me, "Why aren't you contributing more?" And I was tempted to say, because you hate all the things that I've been saying, but I don't remember what I said. And then I played a song for them that I knew was pretty good, that I'd written just me by myself, and that I figured would kind of speak their language. And I remember there was a moment of, oh, I think maybe you're good at this, is what I sort of saw, in their face. And then after that, I immediately went. And to be fair, the grid of that day is probably pretty cloudy because I was probably depressed, right? But then the second half of that day, I went to a friend who I'd written with a dozen times and said, I probably shouldn't be here. I had a miserable first write. I'm depressed about my dad. All I have are ideas about death. And this person said to me, if that's where you are, let's write that. And I sat on a stool and dictated the story of my dad's death to this person, and they pretty much wrote a fantastic, emotionally on point, beautiful song about my experience, So in one day I had kind of I didn't feel like I was good enough to even be there / I felt mistreated. And then I had I just sat there and poured out my heart in the most unartistic and raw way, and a beautiful song was created because of the kindness and talent of the other person. And it can be all that, right? It can be all along that spectrum.
Exactly. And so do you find yourself reacting differently to different personalities, or when you're in a co-write, do you always go the same direction?
I think you have to be somewhat flexible about that. And reading a room, I do a lot of songwriting coaching, like I said, and one of the things I say to people is there are 4 elements that I know of that are necessary, and there's obvious stuff like talent, and then there's things like work ethic and having a quality control meter, and then there's how you are in a room. And that room can be a writer's room, it can be a stage, it can be a meeting, publishing, but it's how you socially act with people. And in spite of my story about being so weird that I had to write a Seahorses song to get through the day, I try to work really hard to be responsive and aware in the room. And at the same time, we can't just make every meeting a counseling session. You have to occasionally say, no, we're here to write songs, and I'm good at this in this area. You're good at this in this area. Let's do this. I think for the most part, it goes pretty smooth unless you have someone who either isn't self-aware enough to know what they do, or an inexperienced songwriter, or someone who's coming off of maybe a difficult emotional moment, kind of like what I said a minute ago, right? I don't have a clue what kind of person I was on that day when I came after my dad had died. I might have been super difficult to even be in the room with, but you have to react to that stuff and be gracious and kind and make the best of it.
We're going to take just a quick break and talk about something that I think is going to be very valuable for you as a Christian songwriter. So check it out.
Do you feel like God's given you a bunch of songs, but you don't know what to do with them? Do you feel like you've got a real call on your life to write, but you're clueless about where to start? Or maybe you've got writer's block and you're wondering if you'll ever get the creative juices flowing again. Well, we've got you covered with NCS membership. NCS membership is all about community and how to grow in this calling you feel deep inside to be heard. We get it. We know that you just want to honor God with your talents and be a good steward of what He's given you. And that's why NCS membership could be your next right step to grow, learn, be challenged, get connected, and ultimately fulfill your dreams to glorify God and reach others with the same passion you feel. It's designed to help you tell your story and to reach listeners who will love your songs. With your NCS membership, you'll receive 24/7 access to valuable masterclasses on topics such as modern hymn writing, worship writing, song form, lyric development, and recording home demos, as well as discounts for other NCS products and a deep connection into a community of creatives who get you. There are a lot of songwriters out there, so you need to be the best you can be to stand out, be heard, and become the songwriter you were born to be. Just go to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com now to check out all the great benefits of becoming part of a decidedly Christian community of songwriters from all over the world. NCS membership, your next right step to being heard.
Well, I just hope that you'll take advantage of that and check it out. All right? We bring you good stuff here on the Song Revolution podcast. So back to our episode.
So when you're in a co-write, is there a certain, do you bring more music, more lyric, or a kind of a blend? How are you thinking about a co-write when you come in?
Yeah. Have you talked much about this kind of journey of songwriting now being kind of producer driven? Have you guys? Okay.
Yeah,
so that
a little bit.
Yeah. So maybe you can direct people to a podcast that speaks to that more. But I found that what we're talking about is that I think when John and I were young, we would have said 2 people go into a room together with a guitar and a piano and they write a song, and maybe one does more lyric, one does more music, but then you put it on a little tape recorder and you hand in a work tape or whatever. And if there was a demo, the demo happened a month later maybe or something, right? And now there's been this influx of producers as co-writers, which I am all for, because if I'm honest, producers building a track in the room as you're in there, that's a very provocative and emotive and helpful thing to me. Like I actually write, I say all this to say, if I'm not writing with a producer, I tend to be mostly a lyric person. If I am writing with a producer, I become more of a melody person, because if my hands are engaged in pianos and guitars, I my brain is doing a certain thing. But if I'm sitting there with my laptop and there's a producer building a track, I am just a different thinker. And suddenly I'm writing what's called top line, in other words, you're putting lyrics and melodies onto a chordal structure, sometimes a piece of music, almost like a soundscape, And so it does depend. Like I've written a lot with Jason Gray, and when Jason and I write, the two of us, I am doing a lot of lyric, and he's a great lyricist, so he doesn't even need it. But I'm more like a classic songwriter, choosing chords and writing lyrics. When I'm writing with an artist and there's a producer in the room, I often can't even play the song for you when we're done because I never touched an instrument, don't know what the chords are, but I'll write a ton of melody because I feel like that production is actually really evocative and actually really, it's a motivational tool for melody. So it really depends. And even when my publishers here will assign me to something or ask me about something, I will say, is this a producer co-write? Is this just me and another writer? Do they play? How well do they play? Because if I'm the primary instrumentalist in the room, I tend to not want to do those writes as much because I'm just not as good at writing a good melody or a good lyric if I'm worried about chord structures and keys and all that stuff.
Such a different world today.
It really is.
And I'm still doing a lot of the classic co-writes, where we really don't have a producer.
And I love those.
Yeah.
They're just different.
Very different. So, when I came back to Nashville a few years ago and people were talking about track guys and top line guys, I'm like, what?
Right.
What is that? And, I've really not been doing that. So do you have a favorite way?
I mean, it depends on what we're trying to do. If I am writing like a really meaningful song that I want to have a lot of deep meaning, I tend to not want to do the track guy thing or track person or whatever, if we want to be fair. I want to sit down with a piano and a guitar and another person and we just build it, from the ground up without any sonic sort of pushing, But if I'm writing for radio or like sync or something really commercial, I actually enjoy the track thing because I can kind of see ahead to what we're doing and to where it's going. And I don't know, like I said, it just engages a different part of my brain when I'm not thinking about chords and things, and it probably also depend on style too. If I was writing like a ballad or something really slow or story-ish, I probably would want to just be on instruments, just two or three people in a room. If I'm writing something more high energy or maybe less intellectual, I would probably just love to have a track just to create more feeling and, to move it forward.
Okay, so do you mean there's Christian music that's less intellectual?
I think that at some point, I don't know who did it or how it got started, but this idea that your radio station will have an ad that says, "We promise you this music will always be positive, encouraging, and safe for the whole family." That began to steer the ship at some point, and when it did, I won't say that that's wrong or that it's never the best thing. I'm sure it's fine, but if you raise that up, those three things, those three general ideas, positive, encouraging, safe, and those are your three primary sort of benchmarks, well, can intellectual and deep and Jesus says hard things, can those be raised up? They probably can't, and I don't have any animosity about that. Part of why I do an artist's career is because I chase those, I go down those paths with my artist career and to speak to the harder things and some of the more complicated things or nuanced things. And I actually enjoy writing CCM, but no, I don't think anybody with a straight face could say CCM right now is extremely intellectual, extremely deep. I don't think that's mean to say that. I don't think that's its purpose at this point. It's supposed to be engaged passively by someone in a car who needs to feel loved and encouraged, and there's nothing wrong with that, not a thing. But it's probably not meant to be engaged with a bunch of, deliberate thought. I think the way I would describe it is this. Have you ever had someone say, "John, I heard that song of yours and I had to pull over the car to listen to it. You ever heard that before? Oh, okay. Well, I think most CCM is not written for you to pull over the car. Why do you want to? That's a lot of pulling over of the car, right? They want you to keep that car going. And that's not a bad thing. That's a different kind of thing than what I'm talking about. But I tend to want to write on my own a lot of those pull over the car type songs because it's just an itch I don't get to scratch as often.
I think that's a brilliant explanation because I deal with so many aspiring songwriters who are very critical of Christian radio. And I keep trying to explain to them that it has a function. It has a place. It's filled with amazing, great, godly, fun, happy people that are really just trying to minister to the soccer moms out there who are driving 18 kids around in the minivan, and they really need something that's positive and encouraging. And
I think the downside is this, that pop music right now is doing a better job of speaking to hard things than we are. That's the problem. I think if radio was only a medium for happy, then we could say we're just doing the Christian version of that. My one struggle right now is that you can go find a lot of pop music that will speak super honestly about hard things, and I think it's a little bit negative. It's a little dangerous maybe that we are the last to jump on that ship, that we're not speaking as honestly as some pop is.
Do you think the pendulum will swing back?
Well, you and I are old enough to remember when it swung the other direction. So, I mean, logically, yes. I don't have a lot of right in this moment. It's hard for me to see. But yes, I think it probably will.
Right. Well, in this day of this, what we're calling the new age of music, the new music economy, rather, is that everybody's building their own tribe. I mean, you're out there doing that. You have your fan base, people that love you, that will buy everything you put out so you can do what you want to do. I think of wonderful artists like Jenny Owens and Cindy Morgan, great friends of our company who've come through the entire CCM pop thing, and now they're very different, especially Cindy. Do you know Cindy's work?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm a fanboy. I've written with Cindy, and it's awkward because I'm such a fanboy.
Hey, Cindy, big shout out to you.
She's great. She's my favorite.
She is amazing. Bows and Arrows and just that whole record. I love that record a lot. But
and you got Andrew Peterson. You've even got people like Jason Gray, which those two guys are actually signed to this record label. So they're clearly it's not too far left of center. But yeah, for the most part, you kind of have your sort of indie tribe situation where you can approach those more difficult things, and then you have the more mainstream CCM thing that's going to be encouraged to be a little more edited, a little bit more safe, a little more positive.
Hey, what a fantastic show today. I hope you caught all the value bombs that were dropped on this one and that you'll begin to immediately incorporate them into your songwriting. You can get even more valuable songwriting tools and inspiration when you join NCS membership. You can become a part of a growing community of songwriters from around the world and tap into some of the most powerful resources available to step you up in your songwriting destiny. Check out NCS membership now at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com and get ready for some exponential power to help you fulfill your call to write. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.